The smoldering bones of King's Landing had cooled to gray ash by the time Drogon returned, yet the dust still drifted in the wind like spirits bereft of purpose. No banners flew above the melted keep. No cheers rose from the mazed streets that once throbbed with the pulse of empire. Bricks had fused to slag beneath the dragonfire that had slain a queen, a tyrant, and a dream in a single roaring breath. Beneath that ruin Jon Snow had surrendered the dagger to Daenerys' heart and watched his love's crimson life spread across obsidian scales. He had expected the beast's fury. Instead, Drogon gathered his mother's corpse and vanished into the unknown sky, leaving only grief whispers and the uneasy question of who would rule when the last Targaryen flame was gone. Whispers grew into legends in the barren months that followed. Some small folk claimed the great black dragon carried Daenerys east to Asshai, seeking wizards who could weave death backward. Others prophesied that Valyria's lingering sorcery would fuse flesh and scale into something immortal. Few dared hope that Drogon would come again. Yet the dragon's shadow reappeared on a crisp dawn nearly 3 years after the Queen's fall, skimming high above the sea in the washed-out light, wings yawning wider than warship sails. Far below, on the breakwater at Dragonstone, Davos Seaworth shaded his eyes, half believing the salt spray had conjured illusions. The wing beats were unmistakable. Drogon was returning, but he did not come alone. Clutched gently in his talons, swaddled in cloth of black and red, was a child no more than a year old. Twin platinum curls framed the babe's cheeks. Even from a distance, Davos could see eyes of bright amethyst staring at the dawn as if hungry for it. Drogon wheeled once, twice, and settled upon the ancient volcanic slope as though guided by memory. The great creature lowered his head, sliding the bundle onto a jut of stone, scorched by forgotten fires, then reared back in a cry so resonant the basalt trembled. Across the bay, sentries shrank beneath the echo, but no flame followed. Drogon merely watched the little one crawl toward the embers of his breath, as though ensuring the child felt the heat and understood its legacy. Ravens flew that morning, black feathers slashing the air toward every quarter of Westeros. The dragon has returned, their messages read. And with him, a Targaryen heir. On the wall, Queen Sansa Stark pressed the parchment between gloved fingers and exhaled a white plume of disbelief. In Old Town's citadel, novice maesters abandoned dusty scrolls and argued whether dragon blood proven divine law or curse. Even across the summer sea in Pentos, the slender figure once called Tyrion Lannister, now a wandering emissary, received the news with a tremor in his cup. His wry smile faltered. "Gods protect us," he muttered. "We are children standing before a wildfire we ourselves lit." Yet it was Jon Snow, living in quiet exile beyond the haunted weirwoods of the north, whose soul split widest at the raven's words. He had sworn never again to bear a crown or sanction the game that killed the woman he loved worse than the cold. But the past, he found, did not wait for vows. The blood in that infant was his own, a child conceived the night before the bells tolled doom. He had felt Daenerys's belly quicken beneath his palm. Though war and doubt had stolen room for wonder, now wonder roared across the sky, demanding a father's reckoning. Jon rode south alone, ghosting through hidden paths and forgotten passes, refusing escorts offered by northern lords, still loyal to their once king. Deer wolves trailed him for leagues until snow cover thinned into the autumn gold of the Vale. He slept little, ate less, haunted by dreams of black wings and lavender eyes. Each dawn he asked himself, what a man, stripped of every title, could offer a child destined to ignite kingdoms. Each dusk he admitted he had no answer. At Dragonstone, Davos cradled the babe beside a smoking brazier while maesters tested milk warmed on coals. The old smuggler held the little girl. Yes, a girl. There was no mistaking the softness of her cheeks, even as she reached for the flames. Her gaze shimmered violet, reflecting coals like captured suns. She did not cry. She listened to Drogon's distant rumble beyond the castle walls. And her tiny lips curved, as if she understood the conversation held in growls rolling across night. They christened her Bela, echoing the name of the last dragon rider born under true Targaryen skies. No midwife recounted her birth. No ledger recorded her proof. Yet the living miracle sat in Davos' arms, gripping his beard with surprising strength, and behind her waited a beast whose mere sigh could raise fleets. That, Davos mused, would be evidence enough. The lords summoned to Dragonstone arrived beneath banners hastily sewn again in crimson and gold. Lord Gendry Baratheon came by oared galley, the stag's crown crossing the shallows alongside the sun-wheeled banners of Dorne's Princess Arianne. Queen Sansa traveled by riverboat to White Harbor, then by sail, armed with bitter memories of her family's ruin at Targaryen hands. All converged upon the Black Fortress like moths to the world's last flame. Each arrived bearing gifts, grain, silver, pardons for old betrayals, yet each came armed with suspicion sharper than steel. None trusted the other to name this child queen without bargaining dear. They found Jon Snow already upon the wind-carved steps, leather travel cloak flapping like a crow's wing. Shadows etched his cheeks, and the once Lord Commander carried no sigil, nothing but a sword. He bowed not to the crownless assembly, but to the babe perched upon Davos' lap. Her lavender eyes met his gray, and in them he saw both Daenerys and a memory of himself before Bowen Marsh's blade stole his innocence. The moment held the hush of a godswood prayer. "I am her father," Jon said simply, "and so I kneel to none but the gods and my child." Tension sparked like flint against flint. Gendry shifted toward his hammer. Sansa's fingers brushed the direwolf-carved pommel at her hip. Even Davos' weary gaze flicked between friends he feared would turn foes. Drogon, sunning on the slope, rumbled deep enough to quiver loose stones. That was the only warning any man required. Gendry let the hammer hang. Sansa's hand fell away from her sword. Cause for war cracked beneath the threat of dragon fire. The council assembled in the grand hall, beneath pillars whorled with Valyrian shapes. Bela gurgled on Davos' knee while Jon stood watchful behind. Sansa addressed the room first, voice steady as winter. "We have lived through the tyranny of dragon queens and the ruin of reckless heroes," she said. "Tell us, Jon, why should we bend again? A babe upon a throne is still a throne, and the game begins anew." Jon's answer surprised them with its emptiness. "Do not kneel," he said. "I ask nothing. I return to claim what was left behind. A child who needs protection, nothing more. That protection," spoke Arianne Martell, "will shake continents. You think Dornish spears will not muster when they hear a princess with dragon's blood cries for aid? You think Triarchy merchants will not sharpen hooks to snatch her absent crown?" She leaned across the table. "Power gathers even when it sleeps. Look at Drogon's shadow." Tyrion tottered into the hall then, limping from weeks aboard storm-tossed vessels. Dust powdered his curls. His eyes glittered with the cold humor of a man who has lost and gained more faith than he wishes to confess. "If power is a sword," he said, "then at least let it be sheathed by those wise enough to fear its edge." He bowed grandly to the babe. "Your Grace," he murmured, "may we avoid the mistakes your forebears treasured." A hush claimed the council until Bela laughed. Pure, unprompted, a sound like bells at first snow. Lords and ladies flinched as though a prophecy had rung. Tyrion's wry smile lifted. He gestured to Jon. "We cannot halt nations from plotting around her. But we can choose what stories will guide them. Is she dragon spawn to conquer, or the pact that ends our endless cycle of crowns?" Dain. The question lingered over the weeks that followed. Dragons of decision, fears, hopes, oaths, circled above Dragonstone higher even than Drogon, whose watchful presence barred every attempt to approach the child uninvited. Ravens burst forth with rumors. The girl could crawl through flame unscathed, could calm the giant beast with a single coup, could drink only warmed wine. Sailors swore they saw her small palms spark with embers when sea spray chilled her. Folk tales multiplied faster than truth could march. Yet for all the wonder, the world beyond rumbled with harsher hungers. The Iron Islands convened their kingsmoot, pirates dreaming of seizing the dragon's hostage. The Reach bickered between newly crowned Lord Butterwell and ambitious cousin Florent, over whether to welcome or resist this reborn dynasty. Beyond the narrow sea, the Golden Company, bereft of its lost dream to seat Aegon Vese, smelled a grander contract. And in the frozen valleys past the wall, free folk traders whispered of shifting lights over Skagos, as though ancient magic sensed the tide of fire turning south again. Jon felt these tremors in his bones. By winter's first hoarfrost crumbling the Isle's ramparts, he knew passivity would invite war to Baela's cradle. So he descended to the cavern where the dragons slept. The heat was suffocating even through leather and wool. Smoke snaked from fissures in the stone. Molten droplets glimmered on scales tougher than forged steel. Drogon opened one crimson eye, slitted and depthless as magma. He did not growl. Jon pressed a palm to his heart, then extended it. "I need you," he said, not as a lord commanding a beast, but as a broken man appealing to the last living shard of a woman he loved. "I need to shield our daughter from the world that killed her mother." The dragon's breath gusted hot enough to sear hair from Jon's brow, yet he did not flinch. He spoke of the clans raising axes, of crowns sharpening like spears, of whispers that could warp a child's fate long before any sword reached her. Drogon inhaled slowly. His pupils widened. Across that gulf of species, Jon felt recognition, not of language, but of grief shared. When Jon emerged, the hairs of his arms had singed black. But Drogon followed into the open air and crouched, inviting a rider. The black beast had borne only Daenerys' command. Now he bent to Daenerys' blood anew. Jon mounted without ceremony. The saddle Daenerys once used lay cracked beneath layers of dust, yet Drogon needed none. He rose in a thunder of wings that rocked the parapets, soared above outraged gulls, and shrieked his challenge to every horizon. A rider and a dragon had been reborn. They flew first to Winterfell. Sweeping low above broken battlements where new towers rose in pine-scented twilight. Jon circled thrice, Drogon's roar echoing off freshly set stone. The northern folk ran but did not raise quarrels. They remembered dragons once burned their ancestors. They also remembered Jon Snow bled for them at Hardhome and Winterfell. When the great beast settled before the gates, Jon dismounted and walked through swirling snow alone. Sansa waited in the God's Wood beneath the heart tree's scarlet leaves. She did not run when Drogon's heat followed Jon like summer. She stood in her heavy cloak crowned with frost, eyes bright with the cunning she had learned at Cersei's feet, and the kindness she salvaged from the dead. Jon knelt before her, not as king but brother. He spoke of Baela, of rising storms, and of the fragile truth that blood alone would not save the future. "Will you help shape her path?" he asked. Sansa's breath fogged the frigid air. She touched his cheek, finding the boy lost beyond the wall. "I will, for Arya, for Bran, for every child never given a choice." She lifted her gaze to Drogon looming behind him and forced a smile. "Besides, I have always hated the cold." From Winterfell they flew to the Twins, where House Frey's remnants still bartered coin for grudging allegiance. Drogon's shadow ended those bargains with a single jet of fire that melted half the keep's stone bridge into slag. Riverlords bent the knee by torchlight that night, and pledged grain and spears to a child they had never seen. Jon's cheeks burned with shame at the swiftness of fear, yet he accepted. The longer the realm remained fragmented, the easier an assassin's blade could slip through. Word of alliances forged by dragonfire reached King's Landing, still half ruined, half rebuilt, ruled by a council of merchants who fancied themselves kings behind parchment walls. They panicked, hiring sellswords from the free cities, bribing the faith militant with gold plates to awaken dormant zeal. In alley shadows, sparrows whispered of a beast that ate queens. They prayed to the Seven that the Iron Throne remain melted rubble, impossible to seat. But gold armored the fearless. A new faith militant marched from the sept gutted skeleton, iron cudgels raised to defy the demon-seed child. The dread of fanaticism steeled Jon's resolve faster than any sword. He returned to Dragonstone with scrolls inked by riverlords, northerners, even Storm's End. He met Tyrion and Davos in the map room where once Stannis had brooded. "We Cannot wait, Jon said. We must crown Baela before enemies crown themselves. Tyrion paced, turning a wine cup absently in his hand. Crown or no, someone must rule until she can toddle farther than the tip of Drogon's tail, he replied. So they drafted a new compact, a regency of 5. Jon, Sansa, Davos, Tyrion and Arianne Martell, each sworn to uphold the child's safety above their own ambition, each invested with equal veto to forestall singular tyranny. Gendry Baratheon forged a circlet of Valyrian steel recovered from melted swords, thin and unadorned except a single obsidian scale gifted quietly by Drogon. It was a promise. The fire that forges crowns can also shatter them. The coronation was held upon the scorched summit of Aegon's Hill, where the skeletal ruins of the Iron Throne jutted like a blackened ribcage from quartz glinting ash. Winds moaned through twisted metal. Pigeons scattered as flames danced along cracks and slide. Baela, barely walking, wore a gown the color of sunrise and clutched Jon's finger with fierce confidence. Drogon perched above, wings mantling the skyline, his roar drowning every horn. The lords assembled knew no wall nor moat nor prayer could shield them if their hearts lied that day. Davos spoke the words first, invoking the ancient Valyrian oath of king's guardianship. Tyrion recited the realm's debts, the mistakes he had made serving one dragon queen, the vows he would make serving another. Sansa extended her dagger across her palm and let a single drop of Stark blood fall upon the shattered throne, sealing north to south in a pact older than parchment. Arianne's desert silk snapped in the wind as she pledged Dorne's spear to the child's untested rule. And Jon, last, lifted his daughter high. For those we lost, he cried, and for those who will live free because we remember. He set the circlet atop her silver curls. Drogon exhaled a pillar of flame into the sky so bright the dawn blanched pale in comparison. A hush settled over Broken King's Landing. In the silence a gull screeched, daring to announce the realm's new era. Then cheers rolled like thunder. Not all voices joined, but enough shook the ruined streets to stir hope where ashes once stifled breath. When Baela laughed, a sound softer than any crown, even the faith militant knelt. Whether from faith or fear, none could say. The first edict of the regency was simple. Rebuild not the Iron Throne but the realm it scorched. Smithies hammered nails instead of swords. Masons carved schools from rubble. Orphans were fed by coffers once swollen with war tide. Drogon patrolled the skies yet burned no city again, for Jon led him only where threats rose, and threats diminished beneath wing-borne shadow. In the stepstones, slavers lowered their whips and broke their own chains to float as driftwood once Drogon's roar darkened their horizon. In Braavos, bankers recalculated risk and found that investing in grain for Westeros reaped steadier coin than financing revolt. And still, Baela grew. She chased gulls along Dragonstone's windy bluffs, her giggles mingling with salt spray. She tugged at ghost grass in the Dothraki Sea during a diplomatic ride, and watched stallions bow to Drogon with instinctive awe. She touched snow at Winterfell, letting flakes melt on her tongue while Ghost, old now, muzzle grizzled, stood sentinel. Everywhere she went, people whispered, some in fear, many in wonder. Not the Dragon Queen reborn, but perhaps the Dragon Queen remade. By the time she could speak in full sentences, Baela asked Jon why the Iron Throne would not rise again. Jon led her to the fused ruin and sat among twisted spurs of melted steel. Because it killed every soul who fought to claim it, he told her. You will carry fire enough within you. Do not sit upon old bones. Baela listened, smoothing fingers over a shard of the old throne. When Drogon's shadow swept over them, she smiled and tossed the shard into the air. Drogon caught it aflame and scattered the embers over the bay like dying stars. Yet peace forged in legend is fragile, as the annals of men are quick to forget the pain that taught them humility. Over distant horizons new wars murmured, stirred by those who coveted flame they thought dormant. The Golden Company reformed beneath a sellsword general named the Basilisk Prince, swearing to seize the dragonling of Westeros and restore the free city's ransom on Dragonfire. In the far north, rumors spoke of an iceborne cult, resurrecting whites among the shadowed calls. And within the halls of the Regency itself, ambition began its slow whisper, as each guardian realized ruling is easier to love than relinquish. One autumn afternoon, Tyrion found Sansa staring down from Maegor's tower, at the city's reborn markets thrumming with life. "We built a gentler kingdom from ashes," she mused. "But how long before gentleness is called weakness?" Tyrion drained his cup. "Long enough for a child to learn what we never did," he said. Sansa's brow furrowed. "And what is that, Lion?" He smiled softly. "That power means nothing unless wielded in mercy." Davos, now older than salt itself, sat Baela on his knee by crackling hearths, and told her of the Onion Knight who once smuggled hope through siege lines. "Remember, lass," he said, "a throne is only a chair until the people lift it." She frowned. "Chairs have legs," she argued. Davos chuckled. "May yours walk gently then." Arianne Martell taught the girl to read the sweep of silk fans that signaled silent treaties in Sunspear courts, while Jon trained her alongside meek stableboys to swing wooden swords until her arms shook with honest fatigue. He wanted her never to forget the strength of those who had none. At night, he read letters scrawled by former enemies begging counsel, each fearing the vacuum left by the melted throne. He answered slowly, weighing justice against mercy, until Baela crept into his chambers and fell asleep on maps dotted with burning candles. Jon would carry her to bed, lay her beneath a quilt stitched with dragons and direwolves, and watch her breathe. For in that small rising and falling he found absolution for all sins that painted his past. Thus the years turned, and Baela's legend swelled, not from conquest but from presence. Children born after the long night grew up beneath her steady gaze, and saw in her not a conqueror, but a flame to gather around. Farmers told stories of a princess who walked fields so their wheat might see what light looked like. Sailors claimed her laughter could call winds. Mummers played at dragons who obeyed a child's kiss better than warhorns. Myth smudged lines with memory, but Jon, Sansa, Davos, Tyrion, and Arianne kept the ledger of truth clear. Baela was mortal. She would bleed if cut. She would err if led by pride. Their duty was to teach her to wield the fire within as warmth before weapon. On her 10th name day, Jon led Baela to the beach at Driftmark, where black surf hissed against quartz sand. Drogon lay curled nearby, great wings folded, snout resting like a mountain dreaming of dawn. Jon knelt beside his daughter. "I once believed my birth cursed the realm," he said. "But you, little light, prove blood is but tinder. It is the heart that chooses what burns." She touched his scarred cheek. "I will choose wisely," she whispered. He hoped so, for across the sea, sails massed beneath colors unknown in Westerosi annals. Emerald serpents and copper vipers, twining spears topped with crowns. The basilisk prince advanced, vowing to carve new thrones from old bones. When ravens brought word, the regency convened again beneath Dragonstow's vaulted ceilings, flames flickering on faces older and wearier than before. They did not argue for long. They had prepared for this. Baela stood beside Drogon on the battlements as war horns moaned beyond the black water. She was small, hair silver bright in the moonlight, eyes reflecting siege fires trembling on distant horizons. Jon tightened her cloak and spoke softly. "You do not have to ride." She met his gaze with the calm of dawn. "Father, the world will never stop testing our resolve. Let it learn my answer now." Drogon lowered his head. She climbed without hesitation, settling between spines that hummed like the strings of some ancient harp tuned by gods. Flames erupted beyond the horizon as the basilisk fleet engaged the first line of Westerosi ships. Yet the night sky lit brighter when Drogon swept overhead, Baela's young voice calling words no maester knew, but every dragon understood. Fire rained like meteors, sudden and precise, striking masts without touching crowded decks, scorching trebuchets without boiling sailors' blood, testament to a rider who chose mercy even in war. Ships surrendered. Sails doused. Men leaped into the sea with hearts hammering not from terror of death, but awe of measured restraint. When dawn spread rose gold across smoldering wrecks, Bela and Drogon hovered above the enemy flagship. She shouted terms. Lay down arms, free all slaves, swear fealty to a realm ruled by law, not fear, and sail home escorted by Westerosi provisions. Those who accepted lived. Those who refused watched their banners incinerate before a single soldier burned. By sundown, no sails of emerald or copper marred the horizon. The basilisk prince knelt upon scorched deck planks, tears of humiliation cutting through soot on his cheeks. Bela returned to Dragonstone greeted not by cheers, but by awed silence. She dismounted and crossed the courtyard toward her waiting guardians. Tyrion bowed deep, eyes shimmering with unshed pride. Davos wiped a sleeve across weathered cheeks. Sansa reached out, fingers brushing Bela's shoulder with maternal grace. But Jon simply opened his arms. She folded into them, trembling now that battle's roar had faded. "Did I do right?" she whispered. "You did more than right," he answered. "You did new." New. The word echoed down corridors of memory as the realm rebuilt again, not from ashes this time, but from soil nourished by spared blood. Merchants named the era the dawn of measured fire. Scholars inked treatises on compassionate absolutism. Across seas, even the Red Priests argued that perhaps the light of the world burned gentlest in hands yet unbloodied. But the greatest change bloomed unseen behind castle walls. Jon lay in his chambers gazing at a sky where stars wheeled like dragons frozen above time. He thought of Ned Stark's voice warning that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword, and of Maester Aemon whispering, "Kill the boy and let the man be born." Jon realized he had done both, but Bela showed him another lesson. Spare the child and let the world be reborn. He resolved that when she came of age he would relinquish every chain of regency, even if longing clutched his heart. He would be father, advisor, friend, but never jailer disguised as protector. Years yet stood between promise and fulfillment. Threats would rise, betrayals would test, and dragons would always hunger. But on that quiet starlit night, Jon finally heard Daenerys' voice, not in grief, but in hope, murmuring through memory like warm wind across the Dothraki sea. "Break the wheel!" And he smiled because he saw the wheel already cracked, its shards glinting harmless beneath the feet of a child who chose how to burn. He closed his eyes and trusted dawn to bring whatever fire might come, knowing that somewhere above, Drogon circled, wings spread across the vault of heaven, guarding the dawn that his rider would one day command not in rage, but in wonder. Autumn melted slowly into winter, and the sky above Dragonstone shed its fiery hues in exchange for the brittle blue of shortened days. In those dwindling hours of light, Bela Targaryen, 11 years old, and already the most formidable rider Westeros had seen since her grandmother's great-great-grandsire, walked the ramparts with a solemnity beyond her years. She traced her fingers across ancient Merlons scarred by dragonfire that predated even Aegon, imagining the long line of rulers whose eyes had settled on this same horizon. Beset by the same question she wrestled each dawn and dusk. What would she make of her birthright? Jon followed at a respectful distance. Gone was the travel-stained ranger who had slipped past watchful eyes to claim his daughter. In his place stood a man tempered by responsibility, his black curls shot through with silver, every line in his brow a reminder that even those who walk with dragons are still bound to time. Ghost padded alongside him, old, stiff in the joints, yet as vigilant as ever, his red eyes taking stock of every gull that dared swoop within bowshot of the girl. Bela halted at the northernmost parapet, where the sea churned as midnight ink. Far out, just visible in the failing light, floated the charred bones of ships the basilisk prince had brought to heel. They drifted as mute memorials to a lesson the realm had not yet fully absorbed. Mercy is not the same as weakness. She clasped the cold stone until her knuckles whitened. "They will come again," she murmured. Jon stopped beside her. "Eh," he said after a moment, letting the wind play through the strands of silver hair that spilled from beneath her hood. "They always do. The shape changes. The hunger does not. Nenderwan." "They think me a child," Bela said, voice barely louder than the surf. Soon they will think they can weather the fire again. Jon studied the horizon with her. And when they come, you'll meet them. On ground you choose, not theirs. That's the first task of a ruler. Decide where the fighting happens, then decide if fighting is required at all. Baela's gaze flicked to him, searching for the reassurance he seldom dispensed. When she found only measured calm, her shoulders eased. Grandfather once said, "Victory is often won in the space between breaths." Ned Stark was a wise man, Jon conceded, and for a heartbeat father and daughter allowed silence to stand in for grief. Then the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint acrid tang, the scent that always preceded Drogon's return. They turned as one. High above, the dragon carved crescents through the paling sky, a silhouette against the evening star. With a triumphant bellow, he folded his wings and spiraled down, molten eyes fixed upon his rider. Baela's face brightened. She abandoned the parapet's chill and ran to meet the creature as he alighted in the courtyard with a thunder of claws. His arrival sent stabling horses shrieking and guards clutching spears they knew were useless. Baela took her dragon's massive snout in both hands and pressed her forehead to scales hot as a hearth. The fearsome beast rumbled, softer than a cat's purr, smoke curling between his fangs. Jon lingered by the archway. He had grown accustomed to witnessing that communion. Girl and dragon, fire and promise, yet it never failed to raise the hairs on his arms. Somewhere in that exchange he saw Daenerys, and somewhere in that he found both comfort and punishment. He waited until Baela stepped away from Drogon's maw to address her. "Your council convenes within the hour." Father." She brushed soot from her cheeks, trying for composure that reminded Jon of Sansa's icy poise. "Will you stand with me?" "Always. But remember, each season they stand with you less for my sake, more for yours." "That is as it should be." Baela nodded, then strode past him toward the keep's inner stair. Royal purple trailed behind her but never dragged. She had insisted her cloak be hemmed high enough to avoid tripping, a small concession to practicality that Tyrion claimed proved her smarter than half the kings he'd served. Jon followed, ghost padding after, and Drogon launched skyward again to resume his silent vigil. Down winding corridors lit by whale oil sconces, they arrived at the council chamber, originally carved for Stannis Baratheon, repurposed now as the beating heart of a realm still learning how to wield shared power. The 5 regents had gathered round the painted table, Sansa draped in direwolf gray trimmed with winter roses, Tyrion leaning against a cushioned stool specially fashioned for his stature, Davos dressed in his plain surcoat bearing the ship and onion sigil, and Arianne Martell radiating sun-kissed warmth in silk the color of dawn. A single empty chair awaited the princess. Baela assumed it without hesitation. She met each pair of eyes, amber, green, gray, and brown, until they inclined or flicked away in acknowledgement of the shift she scarcely recognized in herself. She was no longer a figure to be spoken over, but the axis about which they revolved. "Let's dispense with pleasantries," she said, voice clear, unmeasured. "Reports first." Tyrion produced a scroll, squinting at crabbed ink. "Spies from Mar confirm the Basilisk Prince lost more than half his fortune outfitting the fleet you humbled. He's dipped into loans from the Iron Bank, whose patience, as we know, is only slightly above that of a Dornish scorpion. They'll foreclose on his castles by spring should he default." Arianne tapped lacquered nails on the table. "Foreclosure does not guarantee he won't sell his sword to another buyer, and there is one with deeper pockets." She unrolled her own parchment, ink still wet. "Volantis has convened its triarchs in secret. They speak of the Black Flame, restorationists who dream of Valyrian hegemony. They wish to place a new dragon lord upon a resurrected freehold. A child queen with a loyal dragon. Fits the bill. They will not sue for peace. They will come." "And so?" Sansa folded her hands. "They may, but our spies inside the Rhoynar quarter claim Volantis is battling plague again, fire fever. If half their legions fall ill, they cannot sail for at least a year." Davos sighed. "Plague or no, sell sails will still cross the sea if paid enough. We cannot rely on sickness as strategy." Bela drummed her fingertips on carved driftwood. The realm bleeds coin every month. We maintain garrisons in the stepstones. Pull them back and we look weak. Leave them there and we risk mutiny if pay falls late. She fixed Tyrion with a steady gaze. Which is it to be, my lord hand? Though no royal decree had named him such, the title fit Tyrion like an old glove. He pinched his chin. A show of strength is cheaper in the long run. A gold dragon spent now may save 5 later. Keep the garrisons, but rotate troops so they can till their fields come spring. Grain, not taxes, will feed our coffers. Sansa approved with a curt nod. Davos murmured assent. Arianne lifted a brow, lips twitching in wry respect. Bela leaned back, satisfied. Then she turned to her father, who stood behind her chair like a sentinel. What news from the north? Joan's expression darkened. A trader reached Eastwatch claiming to have seen blue fires beyond the Frostfangs. Dead things moving again. No confirmation yet. The room chilled perceptibly. Sansa's voice dropped. We burnt the corpses after the long night. Bran swore the threat was ended. Bran saw possibilities, Jon corrected gently. Not certainties. The cold does not forget. Bela flexed her gloved hands beneath the table. She had never witnessed The Walking Dead, but the tales were carved into her childhood bedtime, cautionary as nursery rhymes. Dispatch scouts with dragon glass, she ordered. I will ride north come thaw. Tyrion cleared his throat. If you fly, the free cities may smell opportunity. They've waited years for the dragon to leave her nest. Bela's jaw set. Let them wait. A ruler tends her whole flock, including those in frozen pastures. No one argued. The meeting turned to lesser matters. Dock repairs in White Harbor, salt shortages in the Shield Islands. But Bela's thoughts lingered in ice and shadow. She imagined Drogon soaring above barren snowfields, his furnace heart warming air that sought only to kill the living. She imagined herself standing once more before enemies who could neither kneel nor yield. When the council adjourned, Sansa asked to walk with her through the gardens. Gardens coaxed from volcanic soil by Tyrell seedlings and Dornish irrigation know-how. The cold wind carried a memory of roses. Lamps glowed amber along gravel paths, where figs and lemon trees clashed scents like dueling courts. Bela welcomed the quiet hum after the council's clamor. Sansa offered a thin smile. You carry the realm on your shoulders already. You needn't take its nightmares too. Bela plucked a lemon from a branch overhead and rolled it in her palm. You once told me fear keeps a ruler honest. Fear of causing harm. Sansa clarified. Not fear of clouds on horizons you cannot yet reach. Bela considered that. I killed no one in the battle, she said softly. But men still died. Drowning, falling from masts I burned. Their families will curse my mercy as much as my fire. They will curse anything that takes their loved ones. Sansa murmured. And still you were right to spare who you could. Intent matters. In time intent becomes legend, and legend shapes peace. They walked in companionable silence until Bela asked, How did you learn to trust your judgment? Sansa's laugh was brittle. By failing often and living through the consequences. Bela squeezed the lemon. Scent bursting. Then I suppose I will become wise soon. Too soon, perhaps, Sansa said, brushing hair from Bela's brow. But know this. The council stands behind you because you invite counsel, not because of dragon fire. Hold to that. Dragons inspire awe. Listening inspires loyalty. Bela tucked the words away as carefully as dragon eggs and retired to her chambers. There, by flickering candlelight, she unfurled a treatise Tyrion had gifted her, The Arts of War and Peace by Nymeria Sand, a book banned in 3 kingdoms for its revolutionary take on governance by consent. She read it until her eyelids drooped. Sleep claimed her with dreams of snow-haunted forests and a song she could not name. Carried on winter winds. Far to the north, above the shivering sea, a figure in tattered sealskins trudged across ice fields lit by ghostly auroras. The air was so cold it carved the lungs raw. Beside him, A dozen shapes shuffled, some breathing, some not. They halted at a ridge overlooking a ruin half buried in frost. The leader raised a torch of resinous driftwood. Blue flame crackled, unnatural against the dark. He jammed it into the snow before a stone doorway carved with symbols older than men. Frozen hinges groaned as the slab eased open, revealing blackness deeper than night and a hush that swallowed breath. Within, circlets of ice-rimmed statues guarded a central dais upon which lay a spear of pale metal, thin as winter light, sharp as silence. The sealskin man whispered guttural words and reached, his bare hand trembling. He touched the spear. The statue's eyes ignited sapphire. Outside, the dead thing chained at the door snapped its bonds and howled into the boreal sky. Snow fell thick over Winterfell as Bela arrived atop Drogon near midwinter. The sight of the dragon descending against swirling white reminded every soul in the courtyard of tales their grandparents told of the battle for the dawn. Yet this was no dark omen. Children squealed in delight and ducked behind barrels as the dragon landing caved stones. Lords lifted faces to the warmth radiating from his scales, grateful for respite from biting cold. Inside the great hall, Jon's siblings, Arya returned from wanderings in the east, Bran wheeled by Maester Wolkan, greeted Bela with subdued joy. Bran's wide eyes focused somewhere beyond her face. "The wind brings echoes," he said in that distant voice that hinted at worlds unseen. "Shadows stir, but fire walks the paths of shadows." Bela knelt to kiss the king in the Weirwood's ring. "Then let fire guide us." Arya clapped her shoulder. "Come. The training yard still echoes with your father's footfall. Show me how you wield a blade now." They sparred at dawn in air so frigid the hafts of their practiced swords glazed with ice between swings. Horns sounded across the battlements as ravens arrived, bearing sigils of houses sworn to the north. Their messages told of patrols vanishing along the ice lakes, of wildling villages found empty, except for blue-eyed corpses. Bela felt the tempo of the realm change, like a bowstring being drawn in the godswood's silence. That night Jon, Arya, Bran, and Bela huddled by crackling logs. Bran's gaze drifted to flames as if reading runes formed by sap pops and ember glow. "The spear rises again," he whispered at last. "Forged before Valyria. Bound to ice. Broken once by dragon steel. If it is whole again, walls will fall." Bela's skin prickled. "Can it be broken a second time?" Bran's lips flattened. "Only where fire dances with fate, and dragons alone cannot choose the step." Jon gripped the hilt of Longclaw. "Then we ride to greet fate." They planned through the small hours, drawing routes across hides unfurled on trestles. Bela would sweep ahead on Drogon to scout. Jon would lead a host of Northmen and free folk over the Milkwater. Arya would infiltrate beyond the Frostfang passes to sabotage supply caches of any living worshippers of darkness. Bran would remain, linking ravens in a lattice of eyes across the sky. Before first light, Bela ascended. Drogon's roar ripped clouds, scattering ravens in startled drafts. She crossed the wall where it still rose, cracked but standing, buttressed by wildling masonry and dwarf-wrought anchors. Far below, she glimpsed yellow torch specks, Night's Watch rangers braving howling gaps to guide her. She saluted with a dip of Drogon's wing, then drove north into pure white. The world became absence, absent color, absent sound, absent life. Snow swallowed horizon. Sky bled into ground. Only the steady pulse of the dragon's heart beneath her thighs and the faint crack of ice fracturing under thermal currents reminded her that existence was more than endless blank. She pressed low against Drogon's neck for warmth and whispered the Dracarys rune she had shaped into comfort. Drogon hummed. By noon she sighted motion, a ragged column of figures trekking parallel to a frozen river. She ordered Drogon into a gentle glide. As they closed, her breath caught. Half the column staggered with the uncanny gait of death while the living prodded them onward, chained together by hooks of Thule iron. Cultists in gray furs marched unflinching despite frost-bitten faces. At their center, borne on sleds, like great crystal blocks entombing human shapes, features warped by ice, but each clutched shards of black stone. Dragon glass. Prisoners of some grisly harvest. Baela's rage kindled. She had trained to temper anger, yet here it flared righteous. She patted Drogon's scales. "We burn their path," she whispered. Drogon's pupils narrowed to slits of molten gold. They dove. Fire blossomed across the wind-crusted plain in elegant arcs that avoided sleds but severed chains, melting the iron links to slag. The living scattered, screams torn away by gale. The dead shambled mindlessly into searing walls. Baela guided Drogon in sweeping passes until smoke obscured the horizon. When the last cultist fell or fled, she landed beside the sleds and slid from her saddle. The ice prisons hissed under Drogon's residual heat, fracturing. Inside, men and women stirred. Wildlings, white spared reanimation, Southron deserters, all captives slated for dark rites. Baela shattered the remaining shell with her sword pommel. A woman staggered free, eyes red with cold. "They sought the river cave," she rasped. "The spear. The spear sleeps there." Baela gave her a waterskin, already icing over. "Return south to the wall," she urged. "Tell the knights watch the Dragon Queen rides. They will protect you." She left 2 more skins and half a loaf. Then she vaulted back onto Drogon. Overhead, clouds thickened. Needles of freezing sleet stung her cheeks. She pressed on toward the river cave. A fissure legend claimed opened into caverns lined with frost-grown crystals older than the first men. As daylight faded, she spotted a plume of cerulean flame licking skyward among crags. The unnatural hue chilled her more than any wind. Drogon roared, dislodging sheets of snow that crashed into ravines. They descended in a maelstrom of wings. The cave mouth gaped, rimed in icicles long as spears. Blue flame flickered from veins in the stone floor, leading inward like balefire lanterns. Drogon could not fit, so Baela dismounted. She ran gloved fingers down his snout. "Guard," she whispered. He rumbled assent, crouching low. She entered. Each breath crystallized. The passage sloped to a cavern vast enough to swallow the Sept of Baelor thrice over. In its center, within a ring of statues mirroring those Bran described, stood a dais of glacial glass. Upon it rested the spear. Frost jetted from its haft like smoke reversed. Shadows shifted between columns, revealing cultists kneeling around runic glyphs carved in the ice. Their leader rose. Sealskin cloak framing a face half devoured by frostbite, blue flame dancing in empty sockets. Baela drew her sword. "Leave the spear and live," she called, voice echoing. Laughter like cracking glaciers answered. The leader thrust a hand toward her, blue fire whipped forth. Baela ducked behind a pillar, heatless flame-scarring stone. She rolled, closing distance fast. Her blade met the cultist torch spear. Sparks flew where iron kissed sorcery. She felt no warmth, only numbing cold leaching through steel. She pivoted, sliced a tendon, swept legs. The cultist fell. His torch clattered, sputtered, died. The icy cavern dimmed. But the statue's eyes ignited. Ice split. From each husk lurched figures of frozen armor, possessed by ancient magic. 6, 10, 20. Baela lost count. Dada wast. She backed to the dais, glancing once at the spear. It thrummed like a heartbeat. She could not destroy it alone. Above, Drogon roared. The cavern ceiling shook. Snow cascaded, but the statues advanced. Baela clutched her sword hilt, feeling its warmth fade. She whispered a plea to whatever benevolent ghost of fire might hear her. Then, from the passage behind, echoed a wolf's howl and the clamor of steel. Jon and his host burst in, torches blazing, dragon-glass axes lifted. Battle erupted in the blue glow. Northmen hacked at ice warriors, shards flying like diamond hail. Arya flickered through shadows, Valyrian dagger stabbing blue-lit eye sockets. Jon reached Baela's side in 3 heartbeats. "Touch nothing," he warned. scanning threats. Baela's gaze darted to the spear. Bran said Dragonsteel broke it once. Jon's nostrils flared. Then Dragonsteel will again. He raised Longclaw and plunged its Valyrian edge into the dais. Ice shrieked. Cracks spiderwebbed toward the spear. The cavern shuddered. Statues froze mid-swing. Baela sensed the moment. She seized Jon's wrist. Together, they bore down. The dais split with a sound like thunder. The spear toppled, shattering upon shards of its own frost. Instantly, blue flames snuffed. Statues crumbled to slush. The cultists screamed as the magic binding them evaporated, leaving shivering men who suddenly realized they were mortal. Silence followed, broken only by crackling drips. Baela inhaled once, twice, tasting iron in the air. Jon clasped her shoulder. "It is done," she swallowed. For now. They led survivors out beneath swaying auroras. Drogon greeted them with relieved rumble, his eyes fixed on Baela as if to ask permission to roast the entire glacier. "Not today," she breathed, stroking his jaw. The army trekked south beneath green and violet curtains in the sky. On the second night, they made camp at a hot spring where steam ribboned into stars. Baela sat with Arya, flicking pebbles into the bubbling pool. "I felt small," she admitted. "My fire could not reach that spear. I almost froze to statues." Arya's grin was wolfish. "Small is good. It keeps you quick. Big things shatter." Baela elbowed her. "I nearly shattered anyway. And you nearly burned everything once, too. Learning balance is the whole game." Arya leaned against a pale boulder. "Tell me, little dragon, do you know the dance of ice and fire?" "I'm living it." "Then keep dancing." Arya's gaze lifted to Drogon curled beyond the campfires, embers glittering off his scales. "Just remember, partners can change." Spring coaxed crocuses from black mud in King's Landing when Baela returned. Crowds lined streets paved anew with granite and lichen to watch her procession. Drogon overhead, her regents at her side, prisoners of the ice cult shackled but alive at the rear. The faith militant watched from reconstructed septi steps. Silent, cowls hiding thoughts. Some bowed, some refused. Baela noted, storing names. In the throne room, now a sunlit hall devoid of the iron monstrosity, Baela convened an open audience. She presented the cultists evidence of the spear's destruction, and a vial of melted icy metal that no smith could shape, proof of magic subdued. She turned to the assemblage, lords, merchants, septons, small folk who had earned right of attendance through lottery. "Fear has ever ruled Westeros," she began. "Fear of dragons. Fear of winter. Fear of crowns. So long as dread is our engine, we ride ever toward ruin." She extended the vial, liquid glinting. This was a weapon more ancient than our oldest swords, imbued with terror itself. "It is water now. We unmade it together. Dragonfire, North-forged steel, free folk courage, and faith in the living over the dead." Her eyes swept the gallery. "I will rule, but only that you may live unruled by fear. From this day no child shall be conscripted, no purse taxed without council of free folk and lords together, no god elevated above another by sword. We will build a realm where iron melts before mercy." Gasps followed, some joyous, some aghast. A lord of the Reach shouted, "And if fear returns with spears from Volantis?" Baela's reply rang like bell steel. Then Westeros answers, "Not with thrones, but with unity." And if unity fails, her gaze flicked upward where Drogon's silhouette roamed stained glass. "We remember fire is servant, not master." The hall erupted in cheers louder than dissent. Tyrion exhaled as if he had held his breath since the cavern. Sansa pressed a hand to her heart, tears unshed. Jon looked at his daughter and saw a promise fulfilled. The wheel shattered, its fragments reforged into something gentler, stronger. That night, Baela climbed the highest turret to watch twin moons ride the sky. Jon joined her, cloak snapping. They stood in quiet until she spoke. Mother died believing the world would hate her for kindness. I mean to prove her wrong. Jon's voice broke. You already have. She turned, eyes shining violet. Then let the world hate me for something better. He laughed through tears. I'll drink to that. Below, the city hummed soft. Vendors closing stalls, children chasing fireflies, bells tolling vespers. Above, Drogon looped lazy arcs, wings stirring warm drafts that scattered petals from the king's landing magnolias. The night breathed, a realm reborn. Yet, far east, in the cavernous vaults beneath ancient Valyria, another egg stirred under ember-lit ash, one scaled midnight blue fractured by veins of argent. A heartbeat answered distant thunder of its black siblings' wings, and the air trembled with futures yet unwritten. Baela watched the stars until dawn spilled gold upon the rooftops and new banners. The red of Targaryen, the white of Stark, the orange of Martell, the gray of Seaworth, the crimson and gold of Lannister reborn, fluttered together on the breeze. She closed her eyes, inhaled salt and smoke and jasmine, and felt the wheel's broken spokes beneath her feet become rungs of a ladder that any soul might climb. Morning trumpets sounded. She opened her eyes and stepped forward, ready to climb with them, carrying fire that warmed instead of scorched, choosing, in every heartbeat, to burn bright and build. Warm winds drifted across King's Landing in the weeks that followed, carrying citrus from Dorne and cedar from the arbor. But beneath the gentle hum of commerce lurked a tension Baela felt as surely as Drogon felt the flicker of distant torches. The reforms she proclaimed had kindled hope in the lanes and on the lips of small folk, yet hope could not be taxed, and the crown's coffers ran dangerously thin. The Reach sent grain, the Iron Bank extended war-weary credit, and Old Town's archmaesters pledged knowledge, but neither silver nor wisdom flowed fast enough to answer every grievance unspooled by liberty. Guildmasters demanded tariffs be lifted. Spice merchants howled that tariffs be raised. Sparrows insisted on free worship. Volantine envoys threatened trade embargoes if the faith militant was not curbed. Into that muddle stepped lords emboldened by an open court, each brandishing old charters discovered in newly rebuilt archives. In council chambers fragrant with fresh-cut pine, Tyrion presided over scroll-clotted tables and drank weaker wine than he preferred, for clarity was coin he dared not squander. The bank will swallow us if we miss another payment, he told Baela one afternoon, pinching the bridge of his nose as he waved a ledger stained with wax. We need a revenue stream larger than port fees. Crownland's harvests remain a season away, and the stepstones can't pay for themselves until the pirates are pacified. And now, Baela, chin resting on steepled fingers, watched dust swirl in a shaft of sunlight before replying. If coin won't come to us, we must carry the promise of coin to those who have it. Merchants crave security. Offer a royal guarantee of safe passage along the southern trade routes, Dorne to Lys to Myr. Charge a modest convoy fee, payable in advance. With Drogon escorting once a season, caravans will line up for the privilege. A dragon as insurance agent, Tyrion mused with a tilt of his head. Creative, terrifying, possibly lucrative. We will need frigates to patrol between flights. Gendry will send the Stormfleet if we ease the crown's claim to harvest tithes, Davos suggested, rubbing calloused thumbs together. Baela nodded. Condense every tithe into one annual levy, predictable, transparent. Lords hate surprises. So do sailors. Sansa offered a rare smile. So do queens and kings. I'll draft the proclamation. Damn. They set quills scratching, but the ink had not yet dried when the first tremor of the next storm broke. A raven arrived smeared with blood, feathers half plucked, as if it had clawed through claws. It bore a single sentence scrawled in a shaky hand. Blackwater Bay burns. Fleet of Volantis within sight. Within hours, pillars of smoke rose on the eastern horizon, black reeds waving against the sun. The Triarchs had chosen their moment well, sending no grand armada to challenge Dragonfire head-on, but a fleet of narrow-drafted Pentaconters, laden with alchemists' green fire, slipped along the storms of late spring to avoid scouting galleys. They struck first at the harbor's wooden piers, turning casks of wildfire into floating pyres that blossomed like emerald roses. Bela stood atop the Tower of the Hand, watching flames lick the setting sky. Her heart hammered not with fear but with the clarity of purpose. "Sound every bell," she commanded. "Evacuate the docks. Tyrion, coordinate bucket lines at the fish market. Davos, ready the red wine galleys by nightfall. I leave within the hour." Mendero. Jon met her at the courtyard where Drogon waited, scales already shimmering orange in the fire-tinged twilight. Ghost-paced in anxious loops, hackles high at the scent of smoke. "You ride," Jon said, tightening the straps on Baela's leather harness himself, hands steady despite the urgency. "Remember the last lesson. Burn the weapons, spare the sailors when you can. Their triarchs hold the strings, not the oarsmen." "I remember," Bela said, gripping his wrist. Their eyes locked. Gray storm meeting violet dawn. Words felt superfluous. She swung onto Drogon's back, the dragon crouched, and with a blast of furnace heat, they soared. Wings cracked the air like sails snapping through tempests. She guided Drogon low over the mud gate, the beast's roar rattling shutters and steel. Ahead, wildfire painted streaks upon the bay, its unnatural glow reflecting hellish green upon stone and water alike. The Volantine ships, smaller and swifter than Westerosi cogs, darted in and out of the flames, catapults launching pottery jugs that shattered into liquid doom. Bela angled Drogon into a climb that scraped clouds. The alchemist below looked up too late. She whispered the word that had defined both her lineage and her destiny. Drogon exhaled a torrent of orange-gold fire that met green conflagration mid-air, devouring it in a violent clash of hues. The volatile substance, robbed of momentum, splattered harmlessly across already burning waters. She banked again, choosing a target, an overladen fire ship crawling toward the merchant wharfs. Drogon's jaws gaped, but at the last second, she pressed a heel to signal restraint. They swooped low, tail whipping through mast-tops, claws rending rigging. The ship capsized in its own slick of fuel, spilling sailors into flames, yet many found refuge in the cooling patch where her first breath had quenched wildfire. Tiny victories, she told herself, mercy measured in heartbeats. Below, Davos galleys emerged from upriver, oars churning froth. Crossbow bolts whistled, ropes flung grapples to snare enemy spars. The battle surged into chaos. Sparks and seawater, screams and thunder. Through it all Bela wove. Drogon's furnace breaths incinerated trebuchet arms, but she resisted the temptation to wipe fleets wholesale. Instead she crippled them, leaving men afloat on debris, scattering discipline. At dawn only wreckage remained, charred planks bobbing on slick water, lifeboats crowded with shivering sailors, blinking at the dragon perched on the broken mast of their flagship, like judgment incarnate. Bela landed beside Davos' barge where wounded pulled from the bay lay huddled. She approached a Volantine captain, a grizzled woman whose uniform bore the twin tiger sigil. "Tell your triarchs," Bela said in the Valyrian tongue, "that Westeros remembers, but does not forgive. If they seek to trade, they may send merchants. If they seek to conquer, they may send coffins." The captain's lips cracked in an almost smile. "You spare me now," she rasped. "Yet my city will thirst for vengeance." Bela met her gaze without blinking. "Then quench it in ink, not blood. Ink costs less lives." She signaled for the maesters to tend the woman's burns. Drogon rumbled approval. 2 days later, emissaries from Volantis arrived under white banners, their swiftest ship bearing a triarch's apology sealed in obsidian wax. The letter brimmed with flowery contrition, but its terms were plain. Cease hostilities in exchange for a 10-year trade accord and immediate reparations in gold and grain. Tyrion read the parchment aloud in the council hall, arching a brow at the final sentence. "And may the young dragon queen accept our acknowledgement of her rightful place among the heirs of Valyria." Arianne laughed. They learned what a dragon's claws feel like wrapped in silk. Sansa allowed herself a relieved breath. Now the harbor will rebuild, and we have coin to pay the bank. But Jon stood apart near the window, gaze fixed on distant hills. Every victory sows the seed of envy, he muttered. Baela joined him. We cannot live fearing every seed, she said. Still, she felt the weight of his worry settle across her shoulders like a second cloak. Summer unfurled its banners of cicada song and perfumed nights. The realm breathed easier, though tensions bubbled beneath the veneer of evening feasts and reopened markets. Blackwater fishermen hauled nets into a bay still tinged emerald in memory, and children chased dragon-cast shadows across cobbles that glowed red at sunset. Yet Baela's dreams turned restless. Each night she stood in twisted corridors of black stone veined with argent, a pulse echoing through halls strewn with smoldering ash. In the distance, an egg cracked, first a hairline fracture, then a web of glowing fissures, until a hatchling's cry pierced the gloom and woke her, heart racing. She sought counsel in the rookery where Bran's ravens connected minds like threads across a loom. Under flickering torchlight, she wrote to the king in the weirwood. I dream of Valeria's shadow and an egg that calls my blood. Should I follow? Bran's reply arrived days later on a ruffled bird, exhausted by the distance. The parchment was brief. Some songs must be heard before they can be quieted. Beware what music fire makes. Baela read the words thrice before tucking them into her sleeve. That evening she summoned her regents. I mean to sail east, she announced. Into the smoking sea. Silence pooled. Tyrion broke it first. You wish to fetch rumors from the dead empire. Half the ships that venture near those mists vanish. A hatchling stirs, he said. If another dragon is born without a rider aligned to our realm, the balance we've crafted shatters. Jon laid a steady hand on the table. Send scouts, not yourself. They cannot withstand the heat. Even Drogon struggles above the smoking fissures. Only Targaryen blood can survive deep in the plume. And who else among us will a dragon accept? Then, arguments circled like gulls above carrion, but pecked nothing decisive. After hours they conceded. She would go, with a small escort. Jon, Arya, Davos, and a handful of veterans sworn to secrecy. Tyrion and Sansa would rule in her absence, their decrees to carry equal weight. Baela insisted on one more treaty before she departed. A charter granting towns the right to elect local reeves who answered directly to the crown rather than feudal lords. If I never return, she said, let the people carry the torch. Preparations took a fortnight. Craftsmen reinforced a cog's hull with bands of dragonbone, rumored to resist volcanic stone shards. Sails were stitched from sailcloth soaked in seawater brine and ash to mask scent from whatever winged predators haunted the ruins. At dawn, on the summer solstice, the dragonstone cog slipped from harbor, Drogon circling overhead like a guardian star. His reflection rippling in water turned rose gold by first light. The voyage east proved nothing like charted passages to Pentos or Mire. Past the stepstones, currents grew erratic. Compasses spun. Winds exhaled sulfuric breath. On the seventh day, a fog bank birthed from boiling water, swallowed the ship whole. Visibility shrank to a handspan. Baela stood at the prow, Drogon gliding above, but near impossible to see. Only the beat of his wings reached through. Hold to my voice, she called, throat raw from sea spray. Jon and Arya secured rigging while Davos steered by instinct more than stars. Ash fell like black snow, settling in hair and lashes. When twilight came, it was impossible to tell. Late on the eighth night, the fog thinned as abruptly as it had formed. Before them stretched jagged spires of obsidian fused with pale fused stone, rising from a sea the color of split coal. Rivers of magma snaked through cliffs, casting hellish light. Here lay Valyria, the doom frozen mid-breath. They anchored in a cove ringed by basalt teeth. Baela mounted Drogon, who struggled to find thermals amid superheated drafts. Together they scouted a path inland toward a caldera ring-like in perfect ruin. Molten rivers poured endlessly into its heart, yet nothing overflowed. There, nested on a ledge half swallowed by smoke, Baela saw it, an egg larger than a man's chest, midnight blue streaked with argent veins matching her dream. Beneath it writhed cracks spewing embers, each pulse in time with her heartbeat. She landed on a jut of glassy rock. Heat battered her despite fireproof leathers. Sweat seared her eyes. She approached the egg, each step heavy, as if the air itself resisted. When she stretched a hand, the shell vibrated. A line split, leaking molten gold. A shriek pierced the smoke. Another dragon, deep in the caldera, stirred. Jon's shout reached her across the roar of gas vents. He scrambled up a slope with Arya at his back. "Bela, the ground is fracturing." Indeed, fissures radiated from the ledge, steam exploding. If the egg hatched uncontrolled, lava could swallow them. Drogon roared overhead, rattling loose shards. Bela made her choice. She closed both hands around the egg despite the blistering burn. Pain tore through her, but anger at fate for forever demanding sacrifice hardened her grip. She heaved, muscles straining, and freed the egg from its cradle of scorched rock. The shell began to crumble. A pale snout punched through, teeth like glass stone. Bela clutched the top and bottom fragments together, staunching the crack. "Not yet," she hissed. "Not here." She turned, sprinting across a causeway as eruptions chased her heels. Jon reached her, threw his cloak around the scalding egg. Together, they leapt onto Drogon's lowered neck. Arya vaulted up behind, arrows loosed at unseen shapes streaking within the smoke. Winged horrors stunted by mutative ash. Drogon kicked off just as the ledge collapsed in vermilion torrents. They skimmed the caldera, heat blasting like a living furnace. Behind them, the shriek rose, multiplied, multiple eggs cracking, releasing screams of hunger. Valyria awakened. They dove for the ship, which pitched in steam-churned waves. Davos had hoisted anchor already. Sailors yelled prayers half drowned by roaring geysers. Bela landed hard on deck, clutching the shuddering bundle. The hatchling hammered from inside, desperate for release. Drogon circled, flames scorching aberrant wyverns that swarmed from fissures, their twisted wings too warped to ride the thermals. Jon shoved off rails bindings as Davos swung the tiller. The cog lurched into an outgoing current that felt almost intentional, as though the doom itself exhaled them from its lungs. Through night, smothered by volcanic haze, they fled, sails half raised, rowing when winds refused. Bela sat cradling the egg in a water-soaked blanket. She hummed, the lullaby Daenerys once sang to calm Drogon in infancy, a note she recalled from stories Jon shared by hearthlight. The frantic scratching eased. The shell cooled from white-hot to smoldering red. At dawn, they reached clear seawater, blue as ink and blessedly cold. The egg fell silent. A hairline fracture remained, but no new ones formed. Bela exhaled. "We buy time," she whispered. That respite proved brief. On the 12th day of return, they spotted sails on the western horizon, dozens, bearing the sigil of a red kraken entwined with a tiger's clawed eye. Ironborn and Volantine renegades had forged alliance, lured by the rumor of a second dragon egg. Ravens out of Pentos had told them Bela sailed. Spies sold everything for gold. Battle seemed inescapable. Their lone cog could not outrun the wind-catching Dromans. Drogon could torch 4, 10, maybe 15, but exhaustion would claim him long before he finished the fleet. And aboard their deck gyrated an egg whose occupant grew restless, its claws scraping the shell's interior loud enough for all to hear. On that knife edge, Bela turned to Arya. "Take the hatchling when it emerges," she said. "If it bonds to you, no pair of fleets can stop us." Arya's eyes widened, not in fear but in credulity. "I am no dragon rider. You are a Stark of direwolf blood and assassin grace. You fear nothing. The dragon will sense that, or tear you apart. There is no surer test of courage." "Then Miss Alistair," Jon objected. Bela silenced him with a look he recognized. The same steel Daenerys had once flashed before riding into war. "Trust her. Trust the girl who danced with death wearing other faces." Arya stepped forward, placed both palms on the shell. Heat pulsed, but did not scald. She closed her eyes. The ship lurched as the leading war galley closed within arrow range. Grapeshot whistled overhead. Drogon snarled, diving to shatter the galley's mast in a blaze. The egg split with a crack like thunder. Steam billowed, and from it tumbled a hatchling the color of dusk, indigo scales streaked by silver lightning. It screeched, wings flaring unsteadily. Jon raised Longclaw, but Baela shoved him back. The hatchling fixed on Arya, who knelt, meeting its gaze without flinching. An eternity hung. Then the creature crept forward, talons clacking on deck, and pressed its brow to Arya's. "Rise," Arya murmured, as though greeting a pup. The dragon keened softly, a sound almost pleading. She stroked its neck. "Yes, little one. We have foes to chase." "Mendenawand." Baela laughed in sheer relief, though tears stung her eyes. "Name him," she urged. Arya studied the hatchling's silver-lit wings. "Nyx," she decided. "For the shadows, O master." With sailors scrambling to adjust rigging under fresh aerostorms, Baela shouted, "We ride!" Drogon swooped low. Arya clambered atop Nyx, who stumbled, flapped, then found lift as instinct conquered infancy. Twin dragons, one vast, one no larger than a warhorse, climbed together into sky, painted crimson by fire and iron. The pursuing fleet loosed ballista bolts that hissed like vipers. Drogon corkscrewed through them, Nyx mimicking though less nimble. Baela directed her mount to the heart of the formation, jaws unleashing a sheet of flame that ignited pitch-coated sails. She spared the decks, torching only masts, forcing ships to collide in chaos. Meanwhile, Arya, hair whipping silver in dragonborn wind, guided Nyx along the fringes, torching arrow towers and powder stores. Her dragon's flame burned hotter than Drogon's, a white-blue jet that sliced wood like parchment. The battle became an aerial ballet, a seasoned titan and a newborn prodigy carving arcs of incandescent death. Sailors leapt over rails, preferring drowning to fire. Those who clung to decks found Baela's voice above them, yield and live. Many threw weapons in to drink. Within an hour, the Kraken Tiger fleet lay gutted, survivors clinging to flotsam, under the watchful gaze of dragons, who circled until the cog rode between wrecks, gathering the surrendered. Baela ordered them put to oars, towing scant survivors toward Lys where they would be ransomed. "Let word spread," she declared, "that 2 dragons now guard Westeros." When Baela and her company returned, a jubilant city welcomed them beneath banners newly stitched. A blue-silver dragon entwined with black-red wings spread across a map of stars. Crowds surged, chanting lines from a nursery rhyme already spreading. "One for fire, one for night, 2 dragons guard the realm aright." Sansa greeted them at the gates, Tyrion at her side, eyes alight with pride and a flicker of calculation. Yet celebration veiled new dangers. The faith militant, uneasy at these signs of Valyrian rebirth, convened secret sermons denouncing demon spawn hatched from cursed isles. Rival lords whispered that the realm slid from enlightened rule back into draconic tyranny. And in far corners of the world, alchemists, shadowbinders, and would-be dragon lords plotted to snatch the shards of Valyria's legacy. Baela saw the fissures forming even as she basked in cheers. She convened her council that night. Nyx, perched on a newly forged iron perch beside Drogon's, chirped inquisitively, still too young to flame without coaxing. "We must weave unity faster than fear unravels it," Baela said, pacing. "Our charter of electees passes the Lord's declarant in 3 days. Certain old houses will block it. They claim dragons tipped the scales unfairly when the fleet burned." Tyrion sipped watered wine. "Demonstrate the dragons serve all, not merely crown. Dispatch Drogon to extinguish the forest fire near Hayford. Send Nyx to deliver grain to storm-battered Massey's Hook. Symbols cut deeper than swords." Davos nodded. "Show that your dragons build, not just burn." Jon added, "And recall each lord to King's Landing once a year to witness open court. Let them air grievances before the people. Fear daylight more than satire, the Lannisters once said. Make your rule impossible to twist behind closed doors." Baela paused beside Arya, who lounged by the hearth, sharpening a dagger. And when daggers emerged despite daylight, Arya blew imaginary dust from the blade's edge. Then shadows will answer. Nyx hissed in apparent agreement. The charter debate unfolded in the dragon pit, rebuilt into a grand amphitheater of marble benches and oculus roof. Lords filled tiers, small folk packed galleries under banners of their newly chosen reeves. At the central dais stood Baela in simple black leathers, no crown, sword unbelted. A ruler willing to prove she needed no metal to command. The first to speak against the charter was Lord Malin of Maidenpool, a narrow man of pinched expression. "Your Grace," he said, "electing reeves strips lords of ancient duty. Peasants are ill-equipped to judge tax and justice." Murmurs rippled. Baela listened through speeches that followed, some earnest, some veiled threats, until at last she raised a hand for silence. "Every argument I have heard defends the past. Yet the past fed children to dogs for sport, let bandits roam unchallenged, and crowned tyrants who killed their own. I ride forward, not backward. Let fear of change step aside for courage to improve." She looked up where sunlight knifed through the oculus in a column of gold. "Those who stand with me, stand in the light." One by one voters filed to either side of the dais. Malin's camp numbered many powerful houses, Florent, Swan, even remnants of Hightower. But opposite them gathered Middlebury, Tarth, Karstark, a dozen Crownlands barons, and to Malin's shock, Lord Butterwell of the Reach. The scale balanced near equal. A hush settled as Tyrion strode forward, hand by deed if not writ. "It seems the realm is divided," he said, voice carrying. "When men and women cannot agree, we look to precedent. Trial by combat, 7-point vote, the High Septon's blessing. Yet each of those methods has spilled blood." He turned to Baela. "We need a new answer. One befitting a realm reborn." "Ben?" Baela met his gaze, then glanced to Drogon perched above. She stepped aside, gesturing to the gallery of small folk. "This charter concerns them most. Let them cast the deciding voice." Nobles gasped. Sparrows cheered. Sansa's lips parted in surprise, then curved in approval. Malin sputtered protest, but Baela raised a silencing palm. "By nightfall each ward of King's Landing will select one speaker. Come dawn they will vote here, under guard of both dragons. And if lords object—" She smiled thinly. "You may object tomorrow, and the people will remember." All night lanterns glowed. Alleys thronged with debates. By dawn 20 wards produced 20 delegates, scriveners recording their oaths. In the dragon pit under morning's pale sky, the people's voice rang clear. 17 for the charter, 3 against. Baela sealed the parchment with the scale and sword sigil, newly coined for the crown. "Law, not lineage, carries the day," she proclaimed. Peasant and lord alike roared. Later that evening Baela visited the cell where Lord Malin paced, arrested for inciting a brawl that had left 2 small folk dead. She dismissed guards, stepping into shadowy torchlight. Malin turned, eyes flicking from her to the doorway. "Have you come to gloat? I've come to remind you that tomorrow I will pardon you publicly, for the sake of peace. But know this, if you conspire again to spill innocent blood, you will face dragonfire." He paled. "You cannot rule by fear and claim to abolish it." She regarded him sadly. "Fear of consequence is not the same as fear of oppression. Choose wisely which you embrace." She left him to his thoughts. Nyx grew fast, feeding on sashimi barges imported weekly from the arbor, and cattle herds grazed on empty lots outside the city wall. The young dragon's wings spanned twice the height of the Sept ruins within months. Arya trained nightly, teaching Nyx aerial flips that left even Drogon impressed. A deep rumble akin to a laugh. Citizens took to calling her Shadow Rider, though most saw only the silhouette streaking by moonlight. One such night, Arya landed on the Red Keep's rooftop garden, where Baela studied trade manifests by lantern. "I bring news," Arya announced, sliding from Nyx's dot. "Braavos sends an envoy. Word is the Iron Bank intends to cancel the realm's remaining debt, in exchange for a stake in the charter's revenues. They will arrive within a fortnight." Tyrion, who had joined Baela moments earlier, chuckled. "Cancel debt? The bank forgives nothing. They must fear losing influence if commoners hold purses." Baela closed her ledger. Prepare a welcome that shows strength through transparency. Invite the envoy to tour orphan halls, docks, and market councils. When they see prosperity, they'll realize investing in the people profits them most. And Arya's smile was sly. And if they aim to manipulate? Then, Bela said, we remind them the only interest dragons charge is survival. Storm clouds gathered on the political horizon long before they darkened the skies. Lord Farwind of the Iron Islands began raiding Lannisport merchants, arguing the charter did not apply beyond the Sunset Sea. A sect of zealots calling themselves the Ashen Faith preached that dragons were proof of God's wrath. Their numbers swelled in the Riverlands. And whispers from Dorne spoke of a scorpion bolt capable of piercing dragonhide, forged in secret from metal fallen in a star long ago. Bela addressed each spark with flame tempered into light. She dispatched Nyx and Arya to the Iron Islands, where the sight of a dragon perched on Pike's sea tower ended raids without bloodshed. She rode Drogon to Riverrun, where she debated Ashen Faith preachers in open forum, offering sanctuary to their flock if they renounced violence. Many accepted. She visited Sunspear, forging with Arianne a pact banning scorpion forging unless to defend the common folk. Yet every action fed legend, and legend fed dissent. She could see it in the way some lords bowed with smiles too thin. How merchants negotiated with trembling quills. How septons practiced sermons that praised, but did not trust her flame. The realm needed time, but time was the one currency she could not conjure with dragonfire. One autumn eve Bran's raven arrived. Winter quickens. Shadows stir beyond the shattered spear. The heart that sleeps in ice beats again. Bela gathered Jon, Arya, Sansa, Davos, Tyrion and Arianne in the Godswood under twisting red-leafed weir into whose bark centuries of ghostly faces had been carved. She read Bran's warning. The council listened as wind rattled branches overhead. Jon spoke first. We ended that magic in the cavern. Bran sees further than us. If something rises, we must stand ready. Tyrion sighed. The realm barely stands ready for market day. Another existential threat may fracture it. Them, Imden. Sansa exhaled cold fog. Then we keep the fractures small. Jon, you and Arya will raise a watch from Eastwatch to Shadow Tower. Bela, rally the Riverlands militias. They've tasted unity now. They'll fight to protect it. Arianne touched Bela's shoulder. Dorne will send riders. The heat of our sands can slow whatever frost encroaches. Davos offered a half smile. And the Onion Fleet will ferry grain and fire. Bela looked at Drogon and Nyx, both watching beyond walls toward darkening northern skies. Then we prepare. Dragons guard the sky. Soldiers guard the land. And the people guard each other. Then Samhain. Elwarden? Snow fell early that year, dusting the King's Road in white long before midwinter. Bela stood atop the ramparts, as she had on her first return, remembering the burnt city reborn. She felt the wheel beneath her feet. No longer shards, not yet whole. Somewhere farther north a heart of ice beat, each pulse a reminder that peace is a garden forever needing tenders. Jon ascended the stair, wolf cloak swirling. Ravens from the shivering shore, he said, offering a scroll. Small bands of dead sighted. Not armies. Yet. Now. Bela unraveled the parchment, ink blotted by sleet. She closed her eyes. We will meet them before they gather, fire and resolve. You grow tireless, Jon said softly. I have no choice. He rested a hand on her shoulder. Then let me be the tired one for a while. You've carried the realm since you were a babe in Devas' arms. Bela turned to him. Her father, grayer, eyes etched by sorrow and pride. She embraced him, feeling the steadiness of his heartbeat. We carry it together. Above them Drogon unfurled wings at dawn, Nyx echoing in smaller silhouette. Twin shadows crossed walls dusted white, merging into one. Bela watched, a smile unfurling. Someday more shadows will join them, she said. And one day, none of us will be here. But the realm will remember the day dragons chose mercy over might. Jon followed her gaze. And the day people chose to believe in something larger than fear. Dawn spread gold across the snows, across banners bearing sigils old and new, across streets where children built snow dragons and crowned them with daisy garlands. In the hush before horns sounded drills or vendors cried wares, Bela breathed in icy air, heavy with promise. The future waited, not certain, never safe, but radiant in possibility. She descended the stair to answer it, each footfall a vow, to guard mercy with flame, to forge unity from ashes, to bear the wheel's shattered spokes into an unbroken circle of flight. And somewhere in the half-lit sky, dragons rode the wind, heralds of an age unbound by throne or terror, carving arcs that spelled a single word over the waking realm: hope. The first hard freeze of the new winter arrived on a night when the moon lay hidden behind a veil of murk and a hush more profound than silence pressed upon every rooftop of King's Landing. Frost leathered the red tiles of the fish market and glazed the cobbles where wine had spilled at dusk. It filmed the gilded flame-shaped finials along the sept's broken cornice until each resembled a dagger of opaque glass. Even the black water itself hushed in its channel, thickening at its edges to a brittle sheen that cracked if an errant gull dared alight upon it. The hush did not surprise Bela. Cold always wrapped the city so, as though winter's first full breath wished to remind those who lived by dragonfire that another, older power still governed the seasons. She stood on the eastern parapet of the Red Keep, cloaked in wolf fur over quilted leathers, the wind knifing through seams to sting flesh she had long ago taught herself to ignore. To her left, Drogon crouched, black wings pyloned against his flanks, furnace heart subdued to a low ember. To her right, Nick sat upon a reinforced merlin, now grown to 2/3 Drogon's size, silver-streaked indigo scales shimmering faintly beneath the lanterns. The young dragon's eyes tracked thin ribbons of aurora that ghosted southward across the star-strewn sky, lights rarely seen this far below the neck. Yet there they were, frail curtains of emerald and amethyst undulating above the horizon, like echoes of a battle fought far beyond mortal sight. Bela reached out, smoothing Nyx's newly ridged brow. The dragon crooned, an alto vibration that rattled the parapet stone. "Do you feel it too?" she murmured. Drogon's nostrils flared, sending twin plumes of vapor spiraling out into the freezing dark. The air tasted of distant snow and something colder still, the scent Jon once likened to death beneath death. She knew what must have stirred it. Scouts had returned the previous sunset with word of a fissure opening near the Milkwater, visible from the highest northern watchtowers. Blue-white light poured from its mouth in intermittent pulses, like a wounded giant drawing breath. Wildling settlements for 30 leagues around had been found deserted, cooking fires left to gutter out, goat pens flung open, doors swinging on rawhide hinges. No corpses, no tracks. Just a stillness that suggested the world had decided to pause and listen for something unspeakable. Only a handful of rangers had ventured close enough to glimpse the rift. They described shapes moving inside the pallid glow. Humanoids, yes, but impossibly tall and gaunt, trailing frost from their fingers as though they themselves bled ice. Most disquieting, the scouts reported hearing no shouts, no drums, not even the click of bone on bone. The shapes moved in utter quiet, even when crossing fields of wind-packed crust that should have crunched beneath the weight of a child's foot. Whatever force had rekindled the ancient cold was older than the Night King, older perhaps than men's first fire. And it was awake. Bela inhaled through her nose, freezing air slicing clean lines through her lungs. Fear tried to rise and found no purchase. What flowed instead was calculation, the same cold arithmetic she had learned overseeing grain levies and balancing lords' egos. Across the yard, 2 lanterns bobbed. Sansa and Tyrion approaching with data wrapped in parchment and velvet. She did not move until they reached the base of the stair, then descended to meet them, wolves at her heels in the form of airborne shadows. Tyrion's cheeks were scarlet, his breath a ragged plume. He offered a wax-stamped scroll, fresh from Bran's ravens. The fissure collapses at irregular intervals and reopens wider each time. He suspects the stone beneath the Milkwater is riddled with caverns feeding a reservoir of coal deeper than any yet mapped. In his words, the world's bottom-most cellars are awakening their oldest guests. Sansa, cheeks equally chafed, took up the line. Eastwatch estimates 400 free folk arrived today. Half frozen, with tales of their kin walking into the dark without struggle. The watch can't house them all, let alone feed them. Her blue eyes held a sheen that might have been pity or resolve. With Sansa, the two were twins. We must respond before fear metastasizes. We already are, Bella said, voice low but sure. Jon rides at daybreak with 2,000 Riverlanders, 500 Dornish sandsteeds, and every volunteer Archer Harrenhal could spare. Arya scouts ahead on Nyx at dawn. Drogon and I follow with the main skywing. Tyrion lifted a brow. A main skywing of one. Of two, Bella corrected. Nyx is young but swift, and the Rangers trust the sight of her shadow now. It will hearten them to know the newest flame flies their vanguard. He sighed, shifting his weight. I'll draft the ship's orders for grain and blankets. Then softer. I shall also inform the Iron Bank that their interest accrues slower than the next snowfall. Let them quake a little. Sansa managed a tight smile. The city will worry. We should leave a visible commander. I'll hold the capital with Davos. Bella clasped her sister-in-law's hand, gloved fingers squeezing. I leave King's Landing in the safest hands it has known. She felt truth resonate in the words. Sansa had grown formidable. Wisdom tempered by cruelty survived, now honed to an edge of reason. Wind moaned between battlements. Tyrion looked up at Drogon's silhouette and shivered despite the wine. We face echoes of a war most of us survived only by happenstance. Make sure this time the realm survives by intent. Bella touched his shoulder. Intent has claws. She nodded toward Drogon. And wings. Ice dust bit her cheeks as Bella banked Drogon west across the shivering sea. They had flown north through a dawn stitched with violet. Now the second sun haloed blood orange behind them, stabbing long red lances across the snows. Below, the creeping lights of hundreds of torches revealed Jon's host crossing the white knife plain, heads bowed against driving sleet. Farther ahead, a silver-black speck carved graceful arcs through the clouds. Nyx and Arya scouting at high altitude, the younger dragons shriek riding wind currents in intermittent keens that prickled Bella's neck each time she heard them. She urged Drogon higher, where the air thinned and stung her lungs. From here the world looked less like land, and more like a cracked mirror of frost, its shards fit loosely together by black river veins. The Milkwater fissure smoldered upon the horizon, a smudge of blue-white radiance pulsing in a steady cadence like a wounded star. Occasional flashes flared along its rim, as though something within struck invisible iron bars. For the moment, the fissure lay still, but twisted plumes of mist betrayed the churn beneath. Bella signaled Drogon into a dive. The dragon folded wings and dropped like a stone, the world belling outward in a roar of wind. They leveled mere yards above the tree line and skimmed northwards, pine needles whipping in their wake. When they reached Jon's column, she braked, hovering above the lead standard to confer. Jon raised a gloved hand, and within minutes he slogged to a rocky escarpment where she landed. Steam rose off Drogon's scales, melting the snow in a circle around them. Jon's hair was rimmed with frost, his eyes dark hollows of focus. Scouts spot movement 15 miles ahead, he said without preamble. Not dead ones. Living. He offered a battered field glass. Bella took it and scanned. Through the lens she saw a ragged caravan of perhaps 60 figures trudging southwest, each leading a shaggy goat or reindeer. No whites hounded them, yet they glanced behind often. Terror writ clearly in their gait. Wildlings fleeing, she said. Maybe. Or bait. Jon's expression remained bleak. Arya reports seeing ice wraiths farther east, different from whites or others. Thin, quick, no visible eyes. They melt into drifts without a trace. Likely scouts. If those are refugees, we must reach them before the wraiths do. Menderustis. Bela surveyed their column. Cavalry exhausted, infantry slowed by supply sleds. I'll retrieve them, she decided. Drogon can ferry them behind our lines faster than we march. Jon didn't argue. He knew better than to waste breath persuading dragons or riders. Instead he drew from his belt a small pouch. Dragonglass arrowheads, from the caves beneath Dragonstone. Give them to Arya. Nyx's fire is hot enough, but an arrow through ice might buy seconds. She pocketed the pouch. Stay alive until I return, and I'll consider listening to your advice next time. His mouth crooked into a ghost of a smile. Flattery from a queen? I must be freezing beyond sense. She vaulted into the saddle, lifted with a thunderclap of wings, and arrowed north. Snow sheeted beneath them in seamless carpets until the refugee column trembled directly ahead. Baela descended slowly, mindful not to scatter them into panic. Drogon's landing whipped snow into spirals, but she called out in old tongue, a phrase Ygritte had once sung across campfires to soothe jittery goats. The wildlings froze, eyes wide, yet recognition dawned in a woman's face near the front, gray-haired scars mapping her jaw. She thrust aside a boy, stepped forward, hands raised. "Dragon Queen," she rasped, the words heavy with accent. "The frost hunt comes." Baela dismounted, boots squelching in slush. "How many?" "More than Hill's bones." The woman jerked her chin behind, eyes brimming with dread. "They took fighters first. Quiet, like sleep stealers. Then beasts. Then the warmth from the air. Fires die when they near." She clutched a satchel tight to her chest. "We carry tales south, so realm may live. Let the words live if we die." "They won't die tonight." Baela surveyed the group. Old men. Children swaddled in furs. One wounded youth supported between two companions. Too many to mount Drogon in one flight. Too few to abandon. She made her decision. "Form a ring." She motioned with gloved hands. "Drogon will shield you as you march. I'll ride above until we reach my column. Keep torches lit. His fire feeds on them." Fear mingled with awe as they obeyed. Baela vaulted atop Drogon again, soared in loose circles while the line plowed southward. Soon distant silhouettes emerged on the horizon. Nyx and Arya descending fast. The younger dragon landed a short distance away, flinging crystals of ice in all directions. Arya leapt down, hair windspun. "Something moves in the storm," she called. Baela handed the pouch. "Dragon glass. Ice wraiths bleed starlight. Maybe this will dim them." Arya rolled an arrowhead between agile fingers, slid it into a sheath on her belt. "I'll buy you the minutes you need to reach Jon." Without waiting, she swung on to Nyx. The hatchling no longer bounded skyward, arcs luminous in the gloom. Snow swelled, blinding. Shapes flickered at the edges. Slender, white as hoarfrost. They glided rather than walked, appendages tapering to mist. Baela tucked herself behind Drogon's neck and signaled a slow exhalation of fire across the left flank. The warmth repelled the wraiths, steam hissing where flame met cold dense enough to harden mid-air. The wildlings shuffled faster. To the right Nyx strafed, plasma-white streamers of flame slicing the squall open, revealing wraiths dissolving to sleet where heat touched. Arya loosed arrows tipped in dragonglass. Each found its mark with unsettling accuracy. When a shaft struck a wraith's torso, it shattered like spun sugar, releasing a sigh that sounded almost human. Progress ground like a mill wheel, but at last Jon's outriders appeared, hacking a corridor through the drifts. Refugees tumbled into their midst, half crying, half laughing. Baela flared Drogon's wings wide, forming a windbreak as the two hosts merged. Jon himself rode up, face etched with windburn. Baela shouted over roaring gusts. "The frost hunt rides our trail. They fear flame but not steel. We must reach the fissure before more of them pour south." Jon studied the tremoring horizon where blue ghost fires twisted. "We will." He turned, signaling horns. The host angled west toward a low ridgeline. Night fell fast, swirling with diamond dust. Fires were forbidden lest they draw wraiths. Men marched by torchlight kept within shuttered cowls. Dragons patrolled overhead, silent save for the occasional snap of sail-like wings. Sometime past the second watch, a hiss of collective inhalation rippled through the column. Baela, riding ahead, looked back to see the world behind them blanketed with an eerie luminescence. Thousands of points of blue light dotting the snows, advancing soundlessly. The frost hunt. "Em!" She called quiet commands through a speaking horn. Archers knocked dragon glass tips. Mages from Old Town, rare graduates of pyromancy newly loyal to her charter, prepared clay spheres of wildfire diluted for brief but intense bursts. Bela signaled Drogon downward. They took position above the central cart, where wounded lay. Nyx and Arya flanked left. Then they waited. The lights neared, coalescing into forms, tall, willowy faces masked by crystalline helms. Each carried a spear of whitest ice that glowed from within like struck moonstone. Frost steamed off their shoulders. They advanced not in ranks but in loose flowing files, leaving unmarred snow behind as if they merely drifted. Bela felt dread at the back of her skull. These were not mindless wights. These creatures held purpose. She inhaled, summoned her calm, then gave Drogon the word. Fire met frost in a clash that painted night with impossible color. Streaks of incandescent orange slashed against sheets of cyan. Where flame touched wraiths, they withered, limbs curling inward before sublimating in bursts of rime. Yet for every 5 slain, 10 more emerged. Arrows of dragonglass felled some, but many spears deflected shafts mid-air with flicks of surreally graceful wrists. Wildfire bombs tore holes in their approach, but even green flames dimmed fast, smothered by preternatural chill. The front ranks of Joan's infantry braced shields. When the wraiths closed, their spears stabbed with chilling precision. A single touch on a shield rim left rime blossoming across bronzed oak. A slash across mail hoar-frosted the rings until they shattered. Drogon swept low and incinerated a swath, buying seconds. Bela glimpsed Jon dueling a wraith of unusual height, long claws Valyrian edge sparking blue against the being's spear. Each blow rang like struck crystal. Jon parried, riposta, until the wraith overextended and Arya, appearing out of gloom like a shadow, drove a dragon-glass dagger through its knee. The creature folded. Jon beheaded it in a burst of powder. Yet the tide pressed. Bela knew they could fight all night and still lose ground. She peered toward the fisher's glow, now closer, pulses brighter. Inspiration struck. "Drive them," she whispered to Drogon. She banked, scorching a corridor straight toward the fissure. Flames melted trenches 4 yards deep. The snow collapsed behind like hungry surf. Bulwarks of heat formed a funnel. "Jon!" she cried through the horn. Into the rift. He understood instantly. Horns signaled. Lines pivoted, forming wedge formations shielding refugees at center. Dragons strafed boundaries to maintain the walls of searing slush. The column advanced, dragging wraiths with them, for the undead seemed compelled to follow living warmth. Closer now, Bela saw the fissure properly. An open wound in the earth, perhaps 80 yards across, rimmed with jagged ice crystals taller than catapults. Azure light spilled upward in rolling waves. Within, shapes circled an obelisk of black stone. Yes, the same star metal rumored forged by Dornish smiths for scorpion bolts. But this rock was larger than any she had seen, pulsing like a heart. Atop the obelisk hovered a swirl of frost-laden mist, coalescing into a vaguely humanoid figure, whose limbs never quite solidified. The wraiths fed energy into the stone each time they moved. Bela felt the current like a tug in her marrow. This, then, was the heart Bran had warned of. "Break the obelisk, break the hunt," she signaled Arya. Nyx swooped close. Bela shouted across the wind. "Spears feed the stone." "Strike it!" Arya's eyes gleamed in torch glow. She turned Nyx toward the obelisk, arrow nocked. Drogon rose to flank. Together, they dove. Wraiths converged, spears lofted, but Drogon's roar blasted them aside. Bela stood in stirrups, shouting the old high Valyrian phrase Daenerys once breathed. "Drogon dracari setelios." Fire lanced from the great dragon's jaws, not orange, but white-hot, fueled by reservoirs he seldom tapped. The beam hit the obelisk, ice flashing to vapor, rock glowing cherry then solar white. In the same instant, Arya loosed her arrow, silver shaft streaking into the heated fissure, forming in the obelisk's flank. The effect was cataclysmic. Light imploded, sucking all sound. For a heartbeat's silence reigned so absolute Bela thought her ears had gone deaf. Then the obelisk ruptured in a corona of sapphire shards, each fragment vaporizing before it hit ground. The hovering figure shrieked, a keening that vibrated teeth, and dissolved into filigrees of ice, swept upward by flame anvils. The fissure belched a column of steam tall as Old Town's high tower, then began to knit closed. Across the plain wraiths froze mid-stride. Their inner glow flickered, guttered, extinguished. One by one they collapsed, breaking apart into glittering snow. In minutes the only forces left standing were human or dragon. Jon raised a weary fist to signal cease. Men dropped to knees, gasping. Refugees wept. Bela guided Drogon to land near the fissure's rim. Heat still radiated in pulses, melting fresh pools. She dismounted, boots sinking. When Arya and Nyx touched down, she embraced her cousin fiercely. The arrow found the heart, she said against Arya's smoke-scented hair. Arya's laugh came shaky, breathless. The dragon melted the target first. Good teamwork. Jon climbed the ridge, Longclaw's Valyrian edge steaming. He surveyed the field, wreaths of fog drifting over inert ice husks, soldiers leaning on spears. "Is it done?" he asked. "For now," Bela answered. "Hearts can grow back, but perhaps we've taught the cold to fear the fire again." He nodded, exhaustion finally softening his posture. "We'll salt the ground with dragon glass, post rangers, and harvest what iron remains to forge spears of our own." "Doe," she agreed. She looked skyward. Dawn approached, a pale smear on the horizon. The aurora had faded, leaving only normal starlight. They spent the day tending wounded, cremating the wraith shards to vapor, so nothing remained for necromancers to tinker with. By nightfall, the host began its march south. Refugees cushioned in the center, wagons heavier now with recovered obsidian staves and fragments of star metal. Drogon and Nyx flew rear guard. Bela allowed herself a single glance back. The fissure lay sealed, no trace of blue fire betraying the horror beneath. Snow drifted in, erasing even her dragon's footprints. She promised the silence she left behind would remain silent, if vigilance could ensure it. They reached Winterfell to a thunder of horns, black banners stitched with twin dragons flung high against frosted ramparts. Bran waited in the godswood. Ravens perched in concentric rings around him like jewels set in a crown of feathers. Bela entered the clearing alone, leaving dragons to their roost and counselors to formalities. She knelt before the white terry roots dusted with hoarfrost. Bran's unfocused gaze slipped sideways, into realms beyond sight. "The cold has been reminded it is mortal," he said. "You have bought the realm a handful of generations." "A handful," she echoed, though relief fluttered in her chest. "Then we must seed each generation with wisdom and courage. One day," he continued, "fire will fade as surely as ice will rise. Balance walks a narrow blade, yet the songs your people sing tonight will fortify hearts unborn." She lifted her head. "Then we will keep singing." His mouth curved almost imperceptibly. A raven croaked overhead, shaking flurries of snow. "The wheel you break," Bran whispered, "may in time shape itself into something new. No longer a wheel, perhaps, but a ladder. Climb it wisely." Bela touched the heart tree's red leaf, feeling sap pulses slow beneath bark. "Ladders frighten those who refuse to climb. I will extend a hand." She stood, bowed, and left the grove. Outside, Jon waited under torchlight. "Ravens summoned by Bran have flown to every region," he said. "Your charter stands firmer than ever." She fell into stride beside him, boots crunching snow. "Because men needed a tale," she replied. "Now they have a chapter of survival and a glimpse of the cost. With luck, they will guard what they've earned." They entered the hall where Arya toasted wildling elders, Tyrion drafted restitution ledgers, Sansa negotiated grain routes, and Davos recounted the battle to wide-eyed squires. Laughter mingled with the crackle of fire. Dragons' shadows flickered on the high rafters, reminders both of dread and deliverance. Bela accepted a horn of mulled wine, but as she raised it, she felt again the old restlessness, a sense that the horizon still whispered. She caught Arya's gaze across the hearth and saw its echo there. Not thirst for war, but readiness, the understanding that guardianship never truly ended. She drank, warmth sliding rich down her throat, and felt her pulse steady. She had crossed wastelands of ice and fire, bargained with bankers and zealots, parleyed with pirates and living storms. She had witnessed hatchlings break shells into a world that would both fear and adore them. And still, she understood. Her greatest task was to teach that world to live after her. Later, beneath wolfskins in a spare Winterfell chamber, Bela slept. She dreamed not of Valyria's broken towers, nor of the Frost Hunt's spectral lights. Instead, she stood on a grassy hill overlooking endless fields of grain, each stalk tipped with glimmering dew. Children ran between rows, shouting to sky-born dragons whose wings stirred golden ripples across the harvest. No armies marched, no banners bristled, only the hum of insects and the low, contented rumble of distant thunder. She woke before dawn to the distant cry of Nyx and realized the dream was not prophecy or warning but a question. Could she guide the realm to that quiet dawn? She rose, dressed, and went to find Jon and Arya. There were walls to rebuild, treaties to ratify, scorpions to decommission, orphanages to fund, storytellers to commission. Tasks large and small, each a brick in the edifice of peace. She stepped into the courtyard as first light broke. Drogon perched upon the east tower, black against blooming sky. Nyx flitter hovered above the yard, chasing sparks of her own fire, delighting watching stable boys. Bela breathed cold morning, felt it coil warm in her chest, and spoke softly, "Onward," not as a command, as a promise. And with that word she began again. Another day, another turn of the ladder she hoped would never become a wheel. Another song for the dawn she intended to leave flourishing long after Dragonfire, long after even her name had cooled to myth, a testament written not in flame nor blood, but in the living breath of a realm taught, at last, to embrace the light.